Oh, right, yeah. This is another chilling scares. People who recorded their last moments alive, I'm guessing. But yeah, let's go.
Ivan Lester McGuire was a 35-year-old skydiving expert who lived in the small town of Franklinton, North Carolina. He worked as a skydiving cameraman at the now defunct Franklin County Sports Parachute Center, where his job was to capture photos and videos of clients who wanted their skydive jumps recorded. He'd been doing this every day for years, and April 2nd, 1988 was no different. Unfortunately, what began as just another routine workday would end in a sudden, irreversible tragedy. The day began smoothly with Ivan successfully completing 2 dives by late afternoon. But it was an unusually busy Saturday, and before the sun could set, he was called in for a third jump. He was already exhausted by this point, but didn't want fatigue to get in the way of his job, so he agreed to the dive. The plane took off from the runway located right next to the sports center, and within just 15 minutes, it was soaring 10,500 feet in the air. After reaching this desired altitude, Ivan jumped first, making sure to keep his helmet-mounted camera pointed towards the client and their accompanying skydiving instructor. What you're looking at right now is a part of the footage that he captured. A few seconds after the jump, the other instructor opened his parachute, which was Ivan's cue to open his own. But when he reached for his ripcord, it wasn't there. Panic set in as he frantically disregarded getting a good shot and searched his body for the ripcord, hoping it was just stuck somewhere. And that's when he made the horrifying discovery. He wasn't wearing a parachute at all. And since the other instructor had already opened his parachute, he couldn't help Ivan in any way either. After realizing
Damn.
his situation, the only words that came out of Ivan's mouth were, "Oh my god, no." The footage then became blurry as Ivan sped up to 150 miles per hour, or over 240 kilometers per hour. He crash landed in a wooded area near the runway and likely passed away the instant he hit the ground. When rescue workers found his body, his camera equipment and the VHS tape he was recording on were broken into multiple pieces. Fortunately, investigators were able to splice together enough working sections to get a good picture of what happened before he jumped. They were able to rule out both foul play and the possibility that Ivan had intentionally chosen not to wear a parachute. But if that's the case, how could a seasoned expert with over 800 successful skydives under his belt simply forget to put on his parachute? Unfortunately, none of the evidence the investigators were able to gather answered this question. But given his circumstances, a few popular theories have emerged that offer possible explanations for what might have gone wrong. The first of which is that this incident was the result of nothing more than ill-fated complacency. As I mentioned earlier, Ivan had already completed 2 jumps that day and was exhausted before getting on the plane for the third time. Maybe he assumed he was completely geared up, when in reality he was missing the most crucial piece of equipment. However, if he wasn't wearing anything on his shoulders, someone around him would have almost certainly noticed before the jump. Which brings us to the second and more likely possibility. The incident happened because of his camera equipment. You see, unlike today where a tiny action cam is all it takes to film a skydive, back in the 1980s, recording that footage required bulky camera gear that had to be worn in a
Jesus.
backpack. There's a chance Ivan and the others around him mistook this camera bag for the parachute and didn't realize the truth until it was too late. That said, while Ivan wasn't fortunate enough to survive, the footage of his accident stands as a sobering reminder for skydivers to always double, even triple check their gear.
That is like the dreams of falling, or the like. I don't know if anybody else has dreams like that, but you have that moment in a dream where, yeah, well, like you said, oh my god, no, and then you kind of jolt awake. But that happened. I think it was here. It might have been America. I'm sure it was here. A woman. There was a parachute, like a skydiving accident, and the woman had over, like, I think she had like 4,800 jumps or something like that. Like, this was her thing, was going skydiving. She was like, but she just broke up with a fella, and then went out skydiving, and it went wrong. But then they determined that she made no attempt to pull a parachute or the backup parachute. So she basically just did it to top herself, really. That's what I thought that was going to be. But I don't know whether that was. I think it like is when you become complacent with things, like even something that's really dangerous, you get used to it, and you make silly mistakes. I imagine that seems more what it was, especially if his last things was, "Oh my god, no!" That sounds like more a realization of, "Oh shit." But yeah, let's go.
On the 15th of January 2023, Yeti Airlines Flight 691 took off from Kathmandu's Triphuvan International Airport at around 10:30 a.m. It was a domestic flight headed for the Pokhara International Airport, located roughly 124 miles or 200 kilometers west of the takeoff location. Things started off just as everyone hoped, with the plane taking off, climbing, cruising, and even descending without any issues. And as it was about to land at the Pokhara airport, one of the passengers started live streaming on Facebook from within the cabin. This passenger was a 25-year-old Indian man named Sanu Jaiswal. He was an adventurous young man who loved nothing more than exploring new places with his friends and experiencing their beauty firsthand. This time he had traveled to Nepal as a tourist with 3 of his close friends, and after enjoying Kathmandu to its fullest, the 4 of them were headed to Pokhara to experience paragliding. He was excited for the upcoming adventure and wanted to share this moment with his entire social circle, which is why he started streaming. What none of his viewers knew, however, was that this was going to be the last time they would see Sanu alive. Because just a minute after he started streaming, the situation took a terrifying turn as the camera became disoriented and the laughter turned to screaming. What followed was an extremely loud explosion. Somehow the phone stayed intact and continued streaming everything to Sanu's friends and family, but all they could see at this point was nothing short of horrific, with the entire camera feed getting covered in raging flames, and worst of all, the screaming suddenly coming to a halt. Something had gone horribly wrong, and it wasn't long before people found out exactly what. Flight 691 had somehow crashed into the riverbank a few hundred meters away from the airport. The crash also caused the remaining fuel to ignite, so by the time the rescue workers arrived on the scene, there was nothing left. The crash and the resulting fire had taken the lives of the 4 crew members and the 68 passengers. Sanu was among these casualties, as he unknowingly recorded his own final moments with no idea of the tragedy that was about to unfold. The only silver lining in this accident was that the plane barely missed the populated area right next to the river, which would have likely doubled, if not tripled, the losses. As for how things went so horribly wrong when the rest of the flight had been relatively smooth, a months-long investigation concluded that it was mostly due to human error. You see, the flight was originally supposed to land on runway 30, but for some unknown reason the pilot requested to land on the indirect runway 12. Now, the co-pilot, Anju Kariwada, was under training at the time, so it's possible the pilot requested the alternative route to teach her how to land at an awkward angle. Unfortunately, while the plane was turning, she misinterpreted a command and accidentally switched both engine propellers to the feathered position. This resulted in the engine stalling, the plane losing control, turning over, and crashing into the riverbank. Put simply, a single unfortunate mistake cost the lives of dozens of people and uprooted the lives of hundreds of family members.
Yeah, that's something as well. Has anyone else noticed that there was like a string of plane crashes, multiple plane crashes all around the India one in America, I think, one in Canada, I think, a couple in the UK. I'm sure went that like it just seemed for a while there was just constantly plane crashes, and then it went to everything being on fire. I've seen loads of news stories of different places around the world. It's like the same news stories everywhere. Weird. But yeah, let's carry on.
On June 16, 2013, 29-year-old Yevgeny Titov noticed a demolition happening near his work in Lipetsk, Russia. He was on his lunch break and had plenty of time to admire the work being done, so he took out his phone and started recording the demolition. Unfortunately, watching this demolition was about to become the worst decision of his life. Now, I should mention that Yevgeny was being as cautious as he could. He was standing at least twice as far from the building being destroyed as the 2 men in front of him. Yevgeny was also standing off to the side, since given the demolition method, the debris looked like it was going to fall towards the excavator. Tragically, that is not what happened. As the excavator pulled the wall beyond its tipping point, it didn't detach cleanly and rotated mid-air, sending massive bricks and other debris hurling toward Yevgeny. And while the men standing nearby were nearly missed, Yevgeny wasn't so lucky. He was thrown to the ground by flying debris, with the impact leaving him critically wounded while others rushed over to help. Paramedics were called and rushed him to the hospital. Sadly, it was too late. Yevgeny had suffered multiple complex fractures, damaged organs, and serious brain trauma. He passed away shortly after reaching the hospital, leaving his wife and 3-year-old daughter behind, all because he wanted to watch a building being demolished from what he believed was a safe distance. The company in charge of the demolition was charged with criminal negligence for failing to establish an effective perimeter around the worksite, with the video Yevgeny captured serving as a crucial piece of evidence. However, no legal penalty could rewind time or erase the damage that had already been done.
That was almost like a Final Destination movie trailer. That's like when the fact that there was people in front of that's a crazy way to pull down a building. It's so dangerous. I've never seen anybody do that. You see different ways you can just demolish it, explosive wise. Use the ball thing. There's multiple ways, but I suppose people do it that way. But yeah, but then the fact that there's people in front of him, and you saw how that fell. That fell just like it was aim. It had its own mind, and it was going for him itself. Like, and you just think, yeah, that's when you think maybe it's just your time. Especially when the people in front didn't get hit. And you just not even meant to be there, just filming it because you think, oh, look, they're going to rip down a building. And then the building's like, yeah, see me get ripped down, will ya? But yeah, let's go around.
23-year-old Helen Wendy Nyabuto moved from Kenya to Canada on a 10-year study visa when she was just 20 years old. By 2022, she was close to completing her education while also working as a nurse and a personal support worker in the Toronto area. Things were going well for Helen, but things took a tragic turn in August of 2022 when a single accident wiped out everything she had worked so hard to build. She was hired as a personal support worker by someone living in the small town of Chatsworth, Ontario. She decided to rent a room in the only motel in Chatsworth to accommodate this job and started living there. The place wasn't too shabby, but the thing that caught Helen's eye was the motel's outdoor swimming pool. So on August 8, she found enough free time to go for a swim while also live streaming her experience on Facebook. She had the pool all to herself, and it was every bit as peaceful and relaxing as she'd hoped. However, just as she was starting to enjoy swimming, disaster struck. About 10 minutes after getting into the pool, she decided to swim toward the deep end. Unfortunately, just seconds after entering the deep end, she lost control and began drowning. She desperately called for help with the little air she had left. Tragically, there was no one to hear her. After struggling in the water for nearly a minute, Helen lost the fight and passed away just outside the range of her phone's camera, which continued streaming everything live on Facebook. Her last words stating, "Let me enjoy some water," took on a much darker meaning as her live viewers waited for someone to notice Helen. However, she remained unnoticed for nearly 3 hours until 2 other guests finally arrived at the pool and made the heartbreaking discovery while the live stream was still going. But these guests couldn't even believe what they were looking at first.
Why is there just a dead person in the water?
I know, that scared the shit out of me when I got in. I think it's a poodle or something.
That looks so realistic.
I know. I got in and I was like,
And we got in.
is it somebody? Walk over there. Just walk over there.
Dead? Like, what if it's actually somebody dead? Because I'm not even trolling, that looks way too real.
They eventually realized the truth and immediately contacted the motel management. By the time someone checked on Helen, she was long gone. The livestream helped prove that this was nothing more than a terrible accident, though that did little to soften the blow for her family. As her father stated, "I watched the video, I cried, it's terrible." What made the tragedy even more devastating was that Helen was the sole breadwinner for her family. Without her, they couldn't even afford to bring her body home to Kenya. Fortunately, when the story made headlines, the internet came together and raised over 66,000 Canadian dollars to cover her funeral expenses and help her family in their time of need, giving a somewhat bright ending amongst an absolutely tragic situation. Armin
That's actually one of the rare times I've seen a GoFundMe where it hasn't just been for something ridiculous and actually is fair play. But that's crazy. But I still don't understand it. She just lost control. I don't like. But that's crazy. Imagine watching that stream and then being a dad and watching that stream. Would you want? I suppose you'd have to see. But that it kind of like a closing thing, but that's a hell of a dark place to be, watching your daughter drown on a live stream. And then just think of the people streaming it, where you're thinking, and then the boys afterwards, where they're saying, because you're not gonna think that it's just somebody's dead under there. I forgot, boys. I think he's a poodle. That's crazy.
Schmieder was a 28-year-old Italian man with a love for extreme sports. He originally started with skydiving and performed countless jumps across Europe. But as time went on, he started getting bored of skydiving and wanted to try something even more extreme. So, sometime in 2015, he switched from skydiving to wingsuit base jumping. Learning a brand new sport, especially one as dangerous as wingsuit base jumping, was quite risky. But Armin managed to pull through and became quite proficient at it in just 1 year. What he didn't know, however, was that his luck was about to run out. On the 26th of August 2016, Armin climbed to the summit of Mount Kangersteg in the Swiss Alps. On this day, he wanted to livestream his adventure, which started with him putting on the equipment and getting ready for the jump. But since he didn't have any streaming-capable action camera or a secure mount for his phone, he came up with an alternative solution, where once he was fully geared up, he told his viewers, "Today you fly with me," and put the phone in his pocket. All his viewers could see now was the darkness inside of his pocket, with some light bleeding through the fabric. But the audio was still clear enough to understand what was going on, like Armin counting down and making the jump.
2, 1.
Things seemed to be going as expected. However, about 20 seconds after he made the jump, his phone captured the sounds of Armin screaming, crashing into the mountainside, and rapidly rolling down the steep terrain. The fall ended with Armin landing in the middle of a cow pasture, now being completely silent. His viewers quickly contacted the authorities, who spent the next few hours looking for him. Unfortunately, by the time they found him, it was already too late. Armin had succumbed to his injuries and passed away. And while the Swiss authorities never released the true cause of his death, whether it was equipment failure or pilot error, at the very least, he died doing what he loved.
Yeah.
Tevye Pustio was a 29-year-old pop singer in Romania.
He died doing what he loved, but I think maybe if he had another go round, he'd maybe change what he loved. That's what I was just thinking then. I'm so happy that walking in the woods with a dog makes me as happy as anything. Like, I don't need to jump out of a plane or to go up a mountain and jump off in a puffy suit. Yeah, I'm so glad I have a low threshold for excitement.
He was described as one of Romania's rising music stars and was building a bigger following with each passing year. Unfortunately, before he had the chance to make it big, his career was abruptly cut short on August 15, 2020. He was riding through the city of Ploiesti in a car with his wife behind the wheel. And as they were making their way through the city, Tevye decided to livestream his travel from his phone. This stream was just him smoking, listening to music, smiling, and having plain fun. But then, a few minutes into the stream, his wife stopped the car at a crossing of sorts. She looked both ways before driving forward, only for the stream to suddenly cut off, with Tevye screaming in horror being the last thing viewers witnessed. As it turned out, the two were crossing a railway line, and while his wife did look both ways, she somehow missed the train barreling towards them. By the time they noticed, it was already too late. Their car was wrecked completely, resulting in Tavy tragically losing his life. What's crazy is that just a month before this crash, Tavy made a Facebook post stating, "One day the wrong train will take you to the right destination." His wife miraculously survived, but sustained several critical injuries. She was rushed to the hospital and put on life support, though I wasn't able to find any reports on what happened to her after that. The now tragic final memory Tavy left to his fans was him simply having fun and dancing to music.
That's crazy. When you see them videos of like trains hitting cars, you see a car like as solid as a car is, it's no match for a train. They're actually pretty shittily made. The train just blows them to pieces. That's crazy. Again, imagine that. Imagine watching all of them. But still, that's the don't live stream while you're driving or whatever. You distract you or the person driving. That's crazy though. But yeah, and that's the reaction. Sweet.